This is your 10-minute warning. Big Ten TED Live starts in 10 minutes. Welcome, Big Ten fans. This is Big Ten Ted Live.
And hello, everybody, and welcome to Big Ten Ted Live. We got a lot to talk about, don't we? Man, a lot happened over the weekend ever since Friday. Made my way up to Fargo, working the FCS playoffs. North Dakota State knocking off Montana. Big shout out to the Bison. So, a lot to talk about today. We're going to be talking about bowl matchups. Where did Big Ten teams land in the bowl selection process? Of course, we've got two Big Ten teams in the college football playoff. We'll, of course, talk about that. And we'll have these bowl previews kind of closer because we're going to have more news. We're going to have opt-outs. We're going to have all sorts of moving around, some transfer portal entries. So there's going to be a lot of movement. There's going to be a lot of action as we kind of progress down the line here just a little bit. Speaking of transfer portal entries, news kind of just breaking tonight. Graham Mertz is going to be entering the transfer portal. Yes, the former Wisconsin quarterback announced that on Twitter that he will be entering the transfer portal as well. Cade McNamara announced that he is going to be committing to Iowa. Okay, so we're going to be talking about him. Is he a good fit in Iowa City? So here we go. If you haven't already, great time to subscribe to the channel. We've got live streams. We've got Big Ten content every single day. Got that. Also, make sure you follow on Twitter if you haven't already. Got a lot of great content over there, believe it or not, in their Twitter sphere. Great way to support the channel is via the super chat in your comments. Sometimes, the comments are flowing quite a bit. So a super chat is a good way to kind of, one, support the channel, and two, kind of have your question or comment seen. So let's dive right into it. As I said, spent the weekend working up in Fargo, North Dakota, FCS playoffs, Montana and North Dakota State. Man, if you're a college football fan, the FCS playoffs is a good place to kind of get your playoff fix. I know we're going to be getting some action here with the college football playoff pretty soon, but FCS playoffs kind of got me thinking. Bowls and playoffs, they just don't seem to mix. Like, that's kind of where I'm at in this whole deal. Is right now with the 12-team playoff, and that's another story that kind of got confirmed later in the week. Last week was you've got bowls over here, and you've got a playoff over here, and, I don't know if they're really meeting in the middle, so to speak, that well. One thing that I kind of saw in this new college football playoff 12-team thing that's going to be starting in 2024, one thing that I saw is you could have a situation where teams win the Rose Bowl, right? The most prestigious game, the granddaddy of them all. They win the Rose Bowl to get to the Peach Bowl, which really doesn't make a lot of sense, to be honest with you. If I'm speaking candidly, like, I honestly believe the first round on campus, great, thumbs up, love it. That second round, I think, needs to be on campus as well, and then you can rotate 3-year periods with the semifinals at some of these bowl games. I think that's a format that could work. But I like the expansion of this playoff. It just seems that bowls and playoff is just something that doesn't really mix that well. At least that's the way I see it. So that's kind of where I'm at with that as it pertains to the 12-team playoff. Of course, I think it's good. I think 12 is good, right? It gives you incentive to kind of win your conference championship, to get into that top 4 in the college football playoff, which when that was kind of originally unveiled, I thought it was interesting because you have a situation where, Notre Dame, an independent, would never get a bye. So I don't know if that's going to cause them incentive to eventually join a conference here down the road. But, that could be interesting as well to see that develop here down the road in the terms of the college football playoff. But man, it's just like now bowls are kind of just becoming less important. There's kind of less there now, less oomph, so to speak, with bowls. And I honestly believe that back in the BCS days, if you would have just kept your conference tie-ins, Big Ten, Pac-10, and the Rose Bowl, SEC and the Sugar, Big 12 could have alternated between the Orange Bowl with the old Big 8 teams and the Cotton Bowl with the Texas teams, and and all these other tie-ins, and then you would have just had, this was going to be the +1 system that people had been talking about for a long time, is, you play your bowl games, they're extremely important, and then after the bowl games, you pick your number 1, you pick your number 2, and you play in a national championship. But as we know, that didn't end up working out. There's going to be a lot of money to be made with a 12-team playoff. So, that's important as well. And obviously, we'll get into that as we kind of progress throughout the years here and progress throughout time, because there is still, even though it is a couple of years away, there is still a lot of talk as it pertains to the college football playoff. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. I think playoffs and bowls, in some scenario, they can kind of coexist together, but I'm not a huge fan, I guess, of them both merging together. But find a way to make it work, and we'll see what happens. So that's my thought kind of on that. Moving on, let's go. We can see in some comments here in pertains to the college football playoff matchups. Got Ohio State. We got Michigan in the college football playoff. That is very exciting. We got 2 Big Ten teams making it in the college football playoff. The first time that has ever happened. Michigan and Ohio State. So what I'm going to shift around the rundown here a little bit. We're going to be talking now. We're going to start with Big Ten championship reaction between Michigan and Purdue. Michigan is known as a second half team, and Purdue played a very good first half in the Big Ten championship game. Look, when you take a look at this game, I think Purdue came out and they started the way they needed to start. It's just they weren't able to do one thing. They weren't able to score touchdowns. Instead, they ended up kicking field goals. I think that was a big detriment for Purdue as it pertained to the Big Ten championship game. And you got to give a ton of credit to that red zone defense at Michigan, because I think they almost knew in the back of their heads, they say, man, if we allow touchdowns to these guys and they're able to really build up momentum, Purdue gets a 10-point lead. Maybe, God forbid, they get a 13, 14-point lead. Maybe they're kind of on their heels at that point. So Michigan did a great job digging in the red zone, slowing down Purdue to allow them to only kick field goals. I thought that was a huge difference in that matchup between the Wolverines and the Boilermakers, is Michigan being able to dig in their heels, being able to force Purdue into field goals in one way or another, and basically keep them out of the end zone. I think that was a big difference in this game. And look at that second half performance. Like, this has been a second half team for Michigan all season long. And coming into the season, I kind of said that Donovan Edwards might be able to get a look as the 1A in this season. Boy, not only is he 1A, he's a 1 steak sauce for the Donovan Edwards. Look, they rode Blake Corum for a long time this season. Donovan Edwards was kind of in and out. He was injured at times during the season, but Donovan Edwards is hitting his stride right now. So for anybody in the playoff, right, it's going to be Michigan and TCU to kind of start things off. For anybody in the playoff now that's thinking, oh no, Blake Corum, maybe we can sneak and beat Michigan. Yeah, no. Because Donovan Edwards is that guy right now, right? These last few games, even going further back to that Penn State game where they ran really well and he'd kind of been in and out of the lineup after that. This is a rushing offense that hasn't missed a beat right now with Blake Corum. This is still a rushing offense. This is still an offensive front that's going to push you around. This is still a team that wants to run the football first, even without their Heisman candidate, Blake Corum. Look, when I look at J.J. McCarthy, there was a few times where he missed throws in this game against Purdue. And if Michigan, and I think that's the narrative coming out of this game, okay, does this performance against Purdue change anybody's mind going into their college football playoff matchup against TCU. For me, from after the Ohio State game to after the Purdue game, I don't think I'm overly impressed one way or the other. I think it's pretty much status quo since they've beaten the Buckeyes. Look, J.J. McCarthy made some throws. There were some that he missed. And if Michigan is going to make a run, and if this is a team that can win a college football playoff national championship, J.J. McCarthy holds the keys. Hell, J.J. McCarthy is the key to be able to have Michigan to win a college football playoff national championship. Look, I want to give a lot of credit to the Purdue Boilermakers. Look, Aiden O'Connell came out, and I knew he was dealing with a lot, like his family was dealing with a lot. Aiden O'Connell came out and played great. They needed Charlie Jones to play great, and he did play great in that game. But I think where Purdue was kind of falling behind is after Charlie Jones, where were the playmakers? And I think that was kind of the narrative. You had Payne Durham a little bit, and that's kind of the narrative kind of late in the season for Purdue football is, yeah, you got Chuck Sizzle, you got Charlie Jones out there on the outside, but what else do you have? Man, I really think Devin Mockabee has a really bright future in the backfield for the Boilermakers. I think he's going to be a tremendous running back. I believe Purdue might go into the transfer portal at quarterback to try to balance out this offense next season. But this is a guy in Devin Mockabee where now this Purdue team maybe has a little bit of a balance. Maybe this is a Purdue team that can get out there and run the football. Look, Purdue, good season. Hopefully they finish it off with a victory in their bowl game. For Michigan, building momentum. They got out fairly unscathed against the Purdue Boilermakers, back-to-back Big Ten championships. For the University of Michigan, they own this conference right now. That was a great Big Ten championship showing for the University of Michigan. Yeah, thank you, Sunshine Design, for checking in here tonight. Purdue couldn't finish. Yeah, once they got down in the red zone area, they couldn't put the ball into the end zone. And I think that was a big issue for the Boilermakers in this football game. And who knows where this game would have been if Purdue would have been able to get into the end zone. I think things really end up changing. Things swing one way or the other if they are able to do that and are able to get in there as well. Played out as expected. Purdue would be around for a while. Michigan would put on the brakes. Yeah, like the flea flicker. That was fun. That was entertaining. Definitely agree with that. Joseph Ford checking in here today. Second half Michigan. It's like it's almost a different team at sometimes. It's like a fight where you kind of go in there, you kind of get the hang of your opponent, you try to read them, and maybe that's what Michigan actually does. They try to get a hold of their opponent. They'll be like, okay, they're doing this on third down, they're trying to do this on first down, they're trying to run the ball here, they're trying to go off tackle, they're trying to throw slants, that kind of thing. They're trying to feel out their opponent, and when they go into halftime, they're like, okay, this is what they're doing, and this is what we have to do to really put it on them in the second half, But here's kind of the thing. Will that eventually catch up to them? I remember all the way back in the mid-2000s, USC was like that. Was it 2004? Maybe it was that 2005 team that lost to Texas in the championship, where they maybe let some teams hang around in the first half and then they eventually explode the second half. When they play TCU in the Fiesta Bowl, in the college football playoff, is that going to come back to haunt them? I think that's an honest question that needs to be asked right now, because you got a TCU team over there. I haven't watched a ton of TCU football, so I'm going to have to do my research a little bit, watch a little bit of film before I put that preview out there. But this is a TCU team right now with Max Duggan that can really move the ball down the field. Okay, this is a Horned Frogs offense that can do some things. Okay, and that's going to be an interesting matchup against this Michigan defense. But if they get behind, like if this is a TCU team that can put the ball into the end zone, that's kind of where things get a little shaky for Michigan. Do you have a team, whether it could be Georgia in the national championship, who knows, it could maybe be Ohio State. Could it be TCU in the semifinals? Like, there's teams where if they get behind by 2 scores, God forbid 3 scores, and now you got to throw the ball. Logic says, well, they were able to do it against Ohio State. But now you get into a different mental position where now you're behind. There's a lot more pressure on J.J. McCarthy. Being able to, J.J. McCarthy kind of being able to throw the football. Can he throw the football down the field behind 2 scores, behind 3 scores? I don't think that's going to happen against TCU. I don't think they're going to get behind by that much. But what if it happens? What if it's 20-7, even though that's 13? That's 2 scores. But, what if that happens? Can Michigan claw their way back via the passing game? Or do they stick with the running game at that point? It's going to be interesting. Michigan hasn't been in that position a lot this season, so we're really going to find out if this is a Michigan team that can kind of deal with that. Sunshine Design about more Cade McNamara. We'll get to Cade McNamara here in just a little bit. Does he still get the lace up during the playoffs? No. Once you enter the portal, you're done. You're off the team, and I think that's how it is with Cade McNamara. Now there was a situation earlier this season with Indiana quarterback Jack Tuttle. He declared to enter into the transfer portal, and then Tom Allen came and said, "We got some injuries, a quarterback. We need a guy to play quarterback. So can you do that?" And kind of jump out of the transfer portal for a little bit. And I think that's what happened. And then he went back into the transfer portal. So that was a very odd situation for Indiana there this season. But yeah, I believe Cade is done with the Michigan Wolverines. And, big props to him for making that quick decision as a grad transfer right now. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about Cade McNamara going to the Iowa Hawkeyes. So we've got Cade McNamara making his way to Iowa City. This was a quick decision on the part of Cade McNamara, which makes me think that either he really had this set out when he decided to transfer away from Michigan, or Cade and Iowa had discussions of this happening in the future. Either way, no matter how it came about, I think this is a good marriage for both teams. I think this is a guy in Cade McNamara that can fit into the offense that Iowa wants to run. Like when we talk about Cade McNamara, I talked about this in the video when he was entering the transfer portal. He's got a box that he's got to live within. Okay, you need a good running game. You need a solid defense. You can't put too much pressure on Cade McNamara. Iowa, I think, has the box checked for the running game. You look at Caleb Johnson this year as a freshman, ran really hard, ran really well, really came into his own late into the season as the top back in the Iowa backfield. And I think they're going to really try to build on that. Now, the offensive line is another big issue, okay, because this was an offensive line that wasn't great. This is not the normal Iowa offensive line that we usually see. So, can the addition of 5-star Caden Proctor, can he come in and be a stud week 1? Now, Iowa's offensive line, I think, did get better as the season went along, but this was still an Iowa offensive line that we're kind of putting some things together. So maybe in the offseason, if this offensive line can gel a little bit, Caden Proctor comes in and he's really good from day one, maybe that can make Cade McNamara feel a little bit more at home. I think that's what you got to hope if you're the Iowa coaching staff right now. But we talk about the box, and they're checking some boxes. Offensive line looks like it might be okay. You look at the running game, Caleb Johnson. Okay, that looks like it's pretty good. But there's a big box that gets wider and wider and wider every single day, and it's not checked. And it's the wide receiver. It's the people that Cade is actually going to throw the football to, right? Arlen Bruce, transfer portal. Keegan Johnson, transfer portal. Sam Laporta, graduate. So now you're kind of stuck in a situation. You got Luke Lachey at tight end, who I think is going to be a really good tight end, right? Tight end, you at Iowa. I think he can really be a good target down the middle of the field for Cade McNamara in the future at Iowa. But who do you have left to throw the ball to besides Brody Brecht and a couple of corn farmers at this point? Like, Iowa needs to utilize the transfer portal to be able to go out and grab some wide receivers and some playmakers, because I think we saw it this season, right? When Keegan Johnson wasn't in the lineup, this was an Iowa team that struggled, and I think, there was some blame on the offensive line. Spencer Petras, like there's Brian Ferentz. Look, there's blame to go around, but to be honest with you, not having Keegan Johnson, there weren't receivers that really stepped up a lot. So I think that's a big issue. Iowa needs to go into the transfer portal, grab one, probably two key wide receivers. But right now, if I'm a wide receiver looking to put up big numbers, maybe my bolster, win some games, bolster my stock for the NFL draft, become a good pro, I'm not sure if I'm going to Iowa. I'm not sure if I'm going into a Brian Ferentz offense. I think that's the way Arlen Bruce saw it. I think that's the way Keegan Johnson saw it. It's the Charlie Jones effect. And I think the effect really came into effect a lot this season with those two guys. So Iowa needs to go out. They need to find at least a couple of weapons. Okay, is Deontay Vines being your number one target? Is that going to be enough for Iowa to put something up on the offensive side of the ball? Well, that remains to be seen. So they need to go out and find some guys that can help Cade McNamara. I don't know if Iowa can go through another season where that tight end is the absolute number one guy. You need some other targets, especially at wide receiver, to help out Cade McNamara. He is going to be at his best on play action. Iowa next season is going to have to be able to run the football with Caleb Johnson. I think that's how going to be Cade. Like you look at, when they won the Big Ten championship at Michigan, you had Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum running the ball. You had a great offensive line. You had a good defense. And that's the box that Cade McNamara needs to live in. Would love to hear everybody's thoughts on this as we kind of go down the road with Cade McNamara being the quarterback at the University of Iowa. Should be interesting to see the way things kind of play out. And with the bowl game coming up, I'll check out some comments here in just a little bit. Bowl game coming up. We got Spencer Petras injured. We got Alex Padilla in the portal. Sounds like it's going to be Carson May or Joey Labus at quarterback for them right now. So we're going to get into some comments here now. We'll get to bowl games with Ari Gold. Thank you for checking in. We got Iowa and Kentucky again. I didn't check the history because this kind of came up really quick. Got home from Fargo around 2 o'clock today. Was really tired. Needed to take a nap. Didn't have a ton of time after the bowl announcements were made to kind of look up. But I'm like, didn't Iowa and Kentucky play last year? Didn't that happen? Pretty sure it did. Should be interesting matchup over there. Joseph Ford jumping on something here that I just saw on Twitter right before I came on the air. DJ Uiagalelei entering the transfer portal. Like this guy, when you looked at that recruiting class with Bryce Young, it was Bryce and DJ. That was number 1A and 1B. Depending who you ask, some things were flipped. And DJ came out, played a great game. Remember when Trevor Lawrence was hurt? Was it hurt, I think? Or he got COVID. That's right, during 2020. DJ came in, played a great game, even though they lost to Notre Dame that season. But this guy can be a really good quarterback. Like, he can be talented. I just don't think, Cade Klubnik was over there at Clemson. He was another 5-star type of guy. He kind of came in there, and DJ was kind of put by the wayside, so to speak. Can a Big Ten program go after DJ? Look, I think DJ is going to have a lot of confidence that he can be a really good quarterback. I think this guy, DJ Uiagalelei, is going to be one of the highest sought-after quarterbacks. But who knows? Who knows where he could end up? Could Mel Tucker pull something out of his hat where he ends up at Michigan State? I think this is a very interesting one. I would love to see him at the Big Ten. I think DJ Uiagalelei he's a huge kid. And I think he's got a big arm. It's just maybe Clemson just wasn't working out for him for one way or another. At Albany, he's checking in. The second half for Purdue was a killer going back to that national Big Ten championship game. That interception, huge run, hurt Purdue. Put the game out of reach, although surprised how well Purdue kept up. I thought Purdue, this kind of actually almost ended up the way I thought it would. It was like, maybe Purdue would hang around the first half, but I don't think there was really any way where this would be a Purdue team that would hang around for 4 quarters against the University of Michigan over there. So, yeah, that's where we're at. The badass Buckeye checking in. Who has the Buckeyes winning? Who's with me? A second chance opportunity for Ohio State. We will get to that here later on during the show. More from Ed Albanese. We got Purdue matching up against LSU. We'll talk bowl assignments here later in the live stream in Orlando. That's a very interesting matchup. It's kind of what I love about bowl season. Okay, it's been like this for forever. you get these matchups that you don't see very often, that you wouldn't see. Purdue and LSU, that could be interesting. Like, of course, LSU has had a really good season. Brian Kelly did a great job with the Tigers this season, winning the SEC West. That could be a very, very interesting matchup there between those two. More from Sunshine Design. Could Cade have delayed his decision and play in the playoff? Then after the season, just get into transfer, he must have some sore feelings to jump into this soon. Well, he'd been injured this season. And obviously JJ was the starting quarterback at the beginning of the season. They made that decision. Because remember when Cade and JJ split games? Remember when your buddy Big Ten Ted predicted that? Hey, remember that? You remember they split games and then they were going to make a decision because according to Jim Harbaugh and this offensive coaching staff, the quarterback battle was that tight. So it doesn't really surprise me that he wants to get into the transfer portal, this soon and get going at the University of Iowa. But yeah, could he have waited? Of course he have waited. But a lot of times when you're a transfer portal quarterback, you want to jump on certain opportunities because we know there's statistics out there. Don't have them on me. Don't know them off the top of my head. But there's statistics out there where a lot of times kids jump into the portal and they don't really come back out the same way. So I think there's a lot to be said about that. Okay. And I think some kids want to get in early to try to really evaluate decisions, to try to get the attention of some of these schools so they can get to an opportunity where they really, really want to be. More from Joseph Ford. Cade must not have wanted the championship unless he was the guy. Who knows how he was feeling? Look, I think one thing we've learned from NIL and transfer portal being a big part of college athletics is this is a player first. It is a pro player model, not like this old stadium in Miami, but this is a pro player model where we want what's best for these kids and we want them to make the decisions that's best for them. Now, sometimes people can influence those decisions a certain way. Obviously with NIL, sometimes that's monetary. Things that can influence some of these decisions, which isn't great at times, but we want them to be able to make the best decisions for themselves and for their future. And Cade McNamara, of course, made the decision that he thought was best for him. Sunshine Design excited. We got Ohio State taking on Georgia. Early prediction. Boy, this is bold to put out a prediction here on December 4th, right? It's going to be on New Year's Eve. Stoked to see Ohio State and Georgia. He's got Ohio State by 7. I'll get to that matchup. And once again, you see the name of the channel. Look below. It's Big Ten Ted. Going to have to watch some film on TCU. Going to have to watch some film on Georgia. Look, I know Georgia just put up 50 points against LSU in the SEC championship game, but really got to break that one down. See if that defense is at the level. I don't think it was at the level that it was last year. Obviously, that last year, they have 6 or 7 starters drafted off that defense. So that's going to be very interesting. Look, what do we know about Ohio State? What do we know about them? Okay, their weakness is going to run the football, defending the run. It's the toughness. It's the interior. It's usually what we see good Big Ten teams made out of. Right now, Ohio State doesn't really have that. How do they match up with Georgia? Can Georgia exploit that? I think is a something that we're going to have to talk about here today. More about Cade McNamara. I think he was recovering from surgery. I feel he's shut down for the year no matter what he was playing. Yeah, he had surgery. Look, he wasn't going to play either way. Does he stay? I think what somebody was kind of talking about before, does he stay around to try to grab a championship ring if they do end up playing for a national championship? But once again, you got to do what's best for you. You got to do what's best in the interest of you kind of going forward. J-Man34 checking in, friend of the channel. Cade is a great quarterback. If Iowa can score a few decent wide receivers, talked about that here earlier, that Cade can throw to, then they could have a very interesting offense next season. That's going to be the key. Wide receivers. Can they get a couple out of the transfer portal to make this a destination where guys want to be? I think that's a big question right now. So we're going to get to college football playoff reaction. I just want to cover one thing. We're kind of talking transfer portal right now. Just got done talking Cade McNamara right before the show, 20 or 30 minutes before we went live here on the old YouTube. We saw the news. Wisconsin quarterback Graham Mertz has entered the transfer portal. What does that mean? Boy, there's a lot to unpack there, even though this was an expected move. Graham Mertz entering the transfer portal. This was an expected move. I think that me and a lot of other people saw, even if it wasn't Luke Fickell. I think even if maybe Jim Leonard came back as the permanent head coach, I think a lot of people were able to look at the situation and say, Graham Mertz didn't work at Wisconsin. He was a highly recruited guy, high 4-star type of guy, top 100 type of player in the country. Okay, this was like the highest recruited quarterback that Wisconsin has ever had. Of course, the best, highest touted quarterback that they've had, period, is probably Russell Wilson, transferring over all the way back in 2011. But in terms of a guy out of high school, Wisconsin usually doesn't grab guys like this. And they were able to grab Graham Mertz, and I think they had a lot of expectations for this offense and this team, and it just never came to fruition. Look, he had a certain skill set when he came on campus. To be honest with you, I don't think he improved that skill set a ton. Like, bad throws, turnovers, you'd see that on one end, and then you'd kind of come back, and then you'd see, oh, wait a minute, oh, look at that throw, consecutive throws here, consecutive completions, touchdowns, whatever. It's just, it was very inconsistent, I think, for Graham Mertz over his tenure as quarterback at the University of Wisconsin. That's, I think, what marred everything. You know, changing coordinators, I think, was another big thing. I think they tried to do that to try to spark Graham Mertz for him to get better as a quarterback, but it just didn't work out that way. It just didn't work out that way. And rumor has it Luke Fickell, I shouldn't say rumor has it, Luke Fickell said that he tried to keep Graham Mertz in Madison, but it didn't work out, and obviously Graham made his own decision going forward. Look, this is best for both Graham and the Badgers. Now the question has to be asked, where do we go from here as it pertains to Graham Mertz? Okay? Keep an eye on Purdue. And Purdue fans might say, whoa. We never said we wanted Graham Mertz. Like, this is an offense in Purdue that obviously likes to throw the ball. Jeff Brom is a guy that likes to put the ball in the air. They got some balance with Devin Mockabee at running back. Look, sometimes all it takes is a change of scenery. Like, look at Charlie Jones. That's a great example as long as I'm talking about Purdue. Charlie Jones transfers to Iowa, and all of a sudden, he's the best receiver in the Big Ten Conference once he comes to Purdue. Could they do that at the quarterback position? Do they see enough in Graham Mertz to be able to say, maybe that throw there, oh, that looks pretty good. Oh, that looks pretty good. Can we bring him here? Can he gain more confidence in this passing offense where maybe things can kind of progress for him? Maybe he can build a little bit of confidence the more he's throwing the football. It should be very interesting to see where Graham Mertz ends up, because could he go to a high group of 5 team? I still think he's going to want to end up at the Power 5 level. But are there going to be Big Ten teams? Are there, like, what about a team like Illinois? Like, Illinois is probably going to need a quarterback after Tommy DeVito is now in and out of the program. Like, there are teams in the Big Ten Conference. Like, Indiana just had Jack Tuttle transfer out, and they just had Connor Bazelak transfer out. Like, there's teams in the Big Ten, and of course there's teams outside of the Big Ten that need a quarterback. Graham Mertz, whether you think he was great or not, well, he wasn't great. No matter what you think of Graham Mertz, there are other Power 5 programs that might. That's the thing about the transfer portal. You see a guy that says, well, maybe he wasn't that great in this system, but over here, maybe we could unleash his talents. I think Graham Mertz has talent. Maybe it was the system that he was in at Wisconsin. Maybe he was hand-tied. It's kind of hard to say until we see him go to a different school and do something different. Something to keep an eye on. Where will Graham Mertz end up? Want to hear your thoughts in the comments on that one, because he could be a hot commodity as far as Big Ten programs are concerned. So Graham Mertz, very interesting to see where things could happen there. Sunshine Design to Northwestern. That's a solid thought, because Northwestern needs a quarterback. And look, you got Evan Hull back there in the backfield. Okay, you might have a running game that you might be able to work with. Of course, you won't have that great tackle, Peter Skoronski, but maybe that's something you could build. A Northwestern, that's a solid thought there. Really like that. Thanks for chiming in with that comment. Here we got more. Rodney chiming in. If you know for sure where you want to go, you need to make yourself available in the portal as soon as possible. Yep, said that. Before the position gets filled. Like, it's very competitive. Yes, Cade could wait until January 18th, but why? It doesn't really make a lot of sense to kind of wait that long, as Rodney there to say more about Cade McNamara. So yes, Cade could have waited, but Iowa might have went out and say, "Whoa, no, there's Graham Mertz. We're going to pick up Graham Mertz. Come to Iowa." Like this, it's competitive. You got to get there. You got to get out there right away, and you got to kind of make some time there. Oh boy. So here's the beautiful thing about the transfer portal. Here's what makes it so exciting. Fans like me and you, we go down the rabbit hole, baby. And Aaron McGrain, we are going down the rabbit hole, man. Mertz to Lansing. So Mertz to Michigan State. Okay, that's maybe a discussion we need to have. Is Graham Mertz an upgrade over Peyton Thorne? DJ Uiagalelei to Wisconsin. Remember last season when Caleb Williams was kind of being rumored as it pertained to when Lincoln Riley left? There was rumors that, hey, maybe the connection with Bobby Ingram could kind of get him to Madison, because that was being talked about as well. Man, this is the thing. You going down the rabbit hole, baby. And maybe they're bringing guys in. Maybe Luke Fickell work his magic? Because now you're going to have to go out and probably find a transfer portal quarterback at Wisconsin. Can they do it? DJ is going to be a target of almost everybody in need of a quarterback right now. More from Cade McNamara. Cade has not released, say, nice things. Transfer statement, as many transfers guys do, has not congratulated his team on their success. I'm guessing he's a bit bitter. If you watch some of his press conferences after, the competition beginning of the season, maybe after when the decision was made of them splitting games, he wasn't the happiest guy in the world. I kind of noticed that kind of earlier in the season. So there's that with Cade McNamara. So it doesn't surprise me. Look, everybody's different. That's the thing about this transfer portal situation. You can't treat every kid the same. Every kid's not going to be the same. Okay? So I think, not every guy is going to be extremely thankful of the experience he just had, So, and maybe Cade is just one of those guys. So, that's really all it comes down to with that. So Cade McNamara, Graham Mertz, different homes. Cade staying in the Big Ten. Will Graham Mertz stay in the Big Ten Conference? I think that's a big question we need to ask ourselves right now. Let's get in. College football playoff. 2 Big Ten teams. Going to need to take a water break before I get into this one. Okay. 2 Big Ten teams. Semifinal number 1. You've got Georgia taking on Ohio State. Okay, you got that in the first semifinal. You've got Michigan and TCU in the other one. Big question is, can 2 Big Ten teams, can we see a Michigan-Ohio State rematch? Of course, you got the matchups. Are these Big Ten teams going to be able to get out on the winning side of this game? 2 Big Ten teams in the college football playoff. Yes, Michigan and Ohio State both received invites to get into the college football playoff invitational to try to take home a national championship. Look, this is big for the Big Ten Conference. Both the Wolverines and the Buckeyes were really good teams all year long. And for them to get into the playoff, have 2 Big Ten teams as compared to one SEC team, I think is a big victory for the Big Ten. Now, kind of looking early at some of these matchups, I think Michigan matches up favorably pretty well against TCU. Of course, TCU, so, when you got a guy like Sonny Dykes coaching, this is a team that wants to get after it offensively. So I think Michigan is going to be tested on defense. Okay, you can say what you want about TCU. Okay, they probably deserved to be in the playoff. And they're sitting here with a chance to prove everybody wrong for people that said Alabama should have been in. Maybe Tennessee should have been in the playoff. These 2 lost teams, it's a chance for TCU, us against the world mentality. Now, of course, TCU is going to have to buckle up and play big boy Big Ten football on defense. Because you know what Michigan wants to do. Michigan's going to run it. They're going to run it. They're going to try to be physical. I think that's the game plan for Michigan kind of coming into this game. And I know these games are a long ways away right now, and kind of conjecturing what might happen is kind of a fool's errand sometimes, because obviously a lot of things can change in the lead up to some of these bowl games with the long wait. But I honestly believe the way Donovan Edwards is playing right now and the way this offensive line is pushing other teams on the other side of the line of scrimmage, that's, I think, Michigan's going to be Michigan's approach in this game plan. What can we do? What matchups can we take advantage of going down the field against this TCU defense? I think that's where Michigan wants to game plan. That's where Michigan wants to be. Can they get after Max Duggan? Like, that's going to be a big question. They got some good stuff going on. TCU does in the running game as well. Michigan's the heavy favorite. The pressure is on Michigan. Okay, for TCU, no one expected you to be here at the beginning of the season. How does Michigan handle those expectations going into this game? Look, TCU is definitely not a pushover. TCU is a good team. TCU is a solid football team. And if Michigan just thinks, oh, we got to play our game, we got to run the ball well, JJ's got to make a few throws, defense got to get after it just a couple of times, you might get beat by TCU. Okay, because what if TCU gets up by a couple of scores? What if they get up by 14? What if they get up by 17? Is Michigan going to continue to run the football? I think for Michigan to be able to win a national championship, J.J. McCarthy is going to have to be a big-time piece of this offense. He's going to have to make throws. Semifinal and then the national championship, should they get there. Ohio State gets into the college football playoff because you got the flub from the USC Trojans. Okay, Ohio State, a couple of weeks ago, you wanted Ryan Day somewhere else besides Columbus, Ohio, and you kind of were down in the dumps. Now, all of a sudden, it's us against the world. Let's go, Ryan Day. Let's pick it up and let's go win a national championship. It's not going to be easy because you got to face the Georgia Bulldogs in their backyard. Like, we know how good Georgia is. Georgia has been the best team in the country the past 2 or 3 seasons. And here's the one thing I'm looking at early when I look at this matchup in the Peach Bowl. Okay, Ohio State, we know where your weakness is. Okay, we know when you can't run the football, you're one of the problems. We know you have problems being physical and defending the run. It's the trenches. And Georgia, historically, kind of in this run, has been a good team, physical team in the trenches. Of course, they don't have all those studs that they had on defense last season. Ask Michigan about those guys, but that's the big question for me. Can Ohio State establish some running game? Like, what are we going to see health-wise with Mayan Williams? What are we going to see health-wise with Travion Henderson? The big thing I want to see about Ohio State, get these guys healthy. If you get healthy against Georgia and you have a full-strength versus full-strength type of game, I think you could have one of the best games we've seen, because these playoff games in years past haven't really been that great. There's been a lot of blowouts in these college football playoff semifinals, and Ohio State is really trying to avoid that. Look, I think their defense is going to be tested. Stetson Bennett has gotten better, I think, over time at Georgia, like a fine wine, baby. There's a lot going into this where I want some questions answered, okay, if I'm the Ohio State Buckeyes. And I don't know if I'm going to get those questions answered. So that remains to be seen. What's going to happen health-wise? What's going to happen on the defensive side of the football? Can Ohio State hang with the Georgia Bulldogs? It's going to be fun. I'm loving having 2 Big Ten teams in the college football playoff vying after it for a national championship. And you bet your butt this guy wants to see a Michigan-Ohio State rematch for all the damn marbles in the national championship game. Should be interesting to see the way this playoff kind of pans out between these 2 teams. We got a lot of go blue We got a lot of Go Blue, and they're looking pretty good right now. Matt Alderton, thanks for tuning in. J-Man as well. We've got our buddy Lord Raiden coming in, the always opinionated. So here we go. Let's dive into it. OSU and TCU really have no business being there. With only 4 slots, it should be conference champions only. However, it's fun watching SEC tears. Those SEC tears. There's a reason why it's not conference champions only, It's because of Notre Dame. Like that or not. I honestly believe that would be ideal, is 4 conference champions. Like, I honestly believe that. Like, say Notre Dame, just find your way into the ACC, okay? Because that's the contract that they have. They got to join the ACC if they join a league. I would love to see that, because a lot of these times, maybe it was just the situation I was in, but some of these conference championship games, sometimes they just don't seem like they have the juice behind them. And maybe having a situation where, well, you got to win to get in as a conference championship. So, that would be fun. Like Purdue, like an 8-4 Purdue would have a chance to get into the college football playoff. I don't know how some people would feel about that, but yeah, in a perfect world, Mr. Raiden, I think that's the way people would feel kind of going into this thing. But, such is life. J-Man, you got to go with the best 4 teams with resume. Okay, so let's talk about it, because I'm going to get really worked up here. Nick Saban, halftime show, Fox, Big Ten Championship. Who is the producer of this broadcast? That's what I want to know. Who was the guy that answered Nick Saban's Zoom call and said, you know what? This is a great idea. On the one night of the year where we are showcasing our conference, all the great things about the Big Ten with our great media partner, Fox, that does a fantastic job in exposing the Big Ten where sometimes they don't get the exposure that they well deserve. In that particular game, who was the producer that said, you know what? We're going to bring on Nick Saban, and he's going to talk about why he should be in the college football playoff. Look, I understand Nick Saban, people want, you want people to watch. You got a game with Purdue and Michigan in it, like whatever. But know your role, man. What did The Rock say? Know your role and shut your mouth. Like, maybe we need to say that about Nick Saban. We need to get a Dwayne Johnson promo over there in Tuscaloosa. But you know what I mean? Like, what are you doing? What are you doing having that there? I don't really blame Nick Saban that much. Look, yeah, what he said was ridiculous. And it is crazy that we've come to a point, Nick Saban has gotten to a point where he is going on Fox. Okay, let's just call it for what it is. He's going on the competition, and he's trying to politic his way to get into the playoff. Like, there's no other way. There's no other way around it. He's trying to force his way in, trying to use his influence as the GOAT. I'm not going to argue that, because I will be the first person that will line up and say Nick Saban is the greatest coach ever. The numbers speak for themselves. People can disagree. People can say what they want. Look, I'm a Big Ten guy. You know that. For all of you that have been watching, however long you've been watching, you know that. But what Nick Saban has done at Alabama is freaking crazy. But for him to call up Fox, I just can't imagine how this took place. Nick Saban, because do you think a Fox producer is reaching out to Nick Saban, hey, do you want to be on our halftime show to try to politic your way and think why you should be in the playoff? Yeah, nobody's doing that at Fox. It's Nick Saban and Nick Saban's people saying, hey, what about having the greatest coach of all time on your halftime show to keep viewers interested? Like, that's probably how that conversation went. And Fox is like, okay, It's probably what a lot of people are talking about. It's a hot topic right now. Let's have him on for the show. And I'm listening and, like, Nick Saban should be embarrassed. He really should be. Because, look, you're the greatest of all time. You're not going to make it in every season. Okay, you have your chance. Like, this is the beauty about college football and why this regular season should be protected at all costs is, okay, you lost on the last play of the game twice. Great. That means you lost your chance to play for a championship. Usually, now I know we could have a crazy year in one of these years, and obviously with the 12-team playoff, this is going to be different, but you got to go undefeated or one loss. Like, that's the beauty of this. That's what makes these college football games so fun, so entertaining, and so crazy. That's why it is the sport it is today. Look, you lost twice. Okay, yeah, TCU lost once. Okay, you can argue about strength of schedule. You can argue about who would be favored. What are we taking in? Vegas? Is Vegas? Because that's what Nick Saban said. Oh, we'd be favored against these teams. So now Vegas is determining how we pick college football playoff teams? Like, give me a friggin' break. I think Nick Saban should be. I think he feels the college football world slipping out of his fingertips. I think he sees transfer portal. Maybe even some NIL, even though there's probably a lot of money going around at Alabama. Look at the preseason, what he said in regard to the Jimbo Fisher situation with Texas A&M. Now look what's happened throughout the season. People are catching up, Nick. Brian Kelly's catching up. Okay, of these other playoff teams, TCU, right? Sonny Dykes is catching up. The college football world is slipping out of the fingertips of Nick Saban right now, and he just can't handle it. He can't handle it. He can't handle being in the playoff. Now, it is good that we're going to go to 12 teams. We're going to have automatic qualifiers where there are set guidelines. Okay, you win your division, you win your conference, you're into the playoff. And then what happens with the at-larges after that is what happens. But I don't know. That was embarrassing, I think, for both parties, for Fox and for Nick Saban. I hope Kevin Warren got on the horn with whoever was in charge of that show, whoever was producing, whoever was directing, and say, no, why? This is our showcase of our conference, and you let him on? That ain't happening again. That's kind of how I feel about Nick Saban. We're going to get to some comments. Looks like there was a lot of comments as it pertained to that. So I'm just kind of going to try to scroll down. So we might go in and out of order because there's comments about different stuff here right now. J-Man34, Jackson Smith in Jigba. Boy, if he's healthy, that's going to be a game changer. He's got another 2-3 weeks. Who knows? That's something to keep an eye on. If I'm Ohio State, if I'm Ryan Day, don't bring it up. Don't change your hand. Try to make that. Don't let Georgia try to game plan against that, I guess is what I'm trying to do. Aaron McGrain, Ohio State secondary was a little exposed in terms of tackling. Can it be fixed in 3 weeks? Didn't we ask that question about Nebraska? Right? When they fired Frost and then Shenander, can they fix this in an amount of time? It took them until the end of the season. Can Jim Knowles and Ohio State fix this in time against the Georgia Bulldogs? They're going to need to be able to fix it. Did I just compare Ohio State to Nebraska? Sorry, Buckeye fans. Mark Edwards, thanks for watching. Ohio State is going to be cannon fodder for Georgia. Michigan couldn't ask for a better college football playoff position. I agree with that. I think Michigan needs to play a good game. They obviously can't underestimate TCU, and TCU is going to take that us against the world mentality. Michigan needs to come out ready, but yeah, they have a much better position. Look, Ohio State's in a situation where they should just be happy to be in. Okay, because they might be an underdog against Georgia. Maybe they can utilize that role right now. I'd be very curious to know the answer to this. Why I wouldn't want to play Ohio State right now. Would love to hear the explanation, I guess, elaborate on that just a little bit, why they seem so dangerous right now. Are they a motivated football team? That should be interesting as well. More from Lord Radin. Said the same thing last year. Georgia may have won, but they had no business being there. If you can't win your conference, how can you be the best in the nation? I would love to, 4 conference champions. Yeah, I'd love to see that. But, here we are. we're not in that situation because we're going to see 12 teams here in just a little bit. Yes, this is more good stuff from Lord Raiden. Nick Saban needs to that, and that. If we're letting 2 lost teams in, Penn State, yes, lost to number 2 and number 4. They should be ahead of Alabama. So as you compare the two, I'd have to put their schedules side by side. I think Alabama's best wins, I think the committee, Boo Corrigan, the committee chair even said this, Alabama's best wins over Texas and over Mississippi State, which are a couple of 8-4-ish type of teams, 9-3 maybe. I don't know if any of those teams are 9-3, but I think both of them are around 8-4. You look at Penn State, I think where Penn State, look, I think Penn State has played really good. They've gotten a lot better and that nobody's really talked about them. But I think where Penn State falls behind a little bit is maybe their quality wins. Outside of, those teams, where did Penn State get a good win? So I think that's where that kind of falls into. Auburn didn't really have a great year. Of course, Penn State took it to Auburn kind of early in this season. Kind of going back to Nick Saban. Nick Saban should be embarrassed, according to Mark R. Edwards, friend of the channel. I hope he has more dignity than that. Maybe Alabama boosters put him up there to that shameful plea. I mean, it's possible. I mean, who knows what are the inner workings of all these things and how these things work out. But, as a guy, I was up in, for those of you who are kind of late to the live stream, I was up in Fargo, North Dakota on Saturday working as the lead replay operator for some FCS football on ESPN+. And I can only imagine, it's already hectic in a live TV truck. I can only imagine, and maybe someone's telling the producer this, it'd be very interesting. I would be, obviously, me being the guy that works in live TV, I would love to have seen how that all unfolded in the truck. Okay, who's telling? Did someone say to the producer, yeah, we got Nick Saban on the line and you got to go to that at halftime? I'm sure that decision comes up probably higher than the producer of that show. But I would just be, because now all of a sudden it's already hectic in there to begin with. And now all of a sudden, we're going to have Nick Saban on the show. Whoa, that just completely changed the whole direction of this halftime show. So that's one part of it. That's the part I would love to know about that. But yeah, it's not great. It's not good. It's not a good look for Fox. I don't think it's a good look for the Big Ten, and it sure as hell ain't a good look for Nick Saban. I'll tell you that much. Matt Alderton joining in, he had no business being there at halftime. Yeah. It takes 2 to tango. That's Fox, and it's Nick Saban. Mark Edwards doing the Lord's work. Please, everybody, like the video. It takes just a second. Actually, it takes less than a second. So, like the video. Appreciate you getting the word out there. J-Man saying, how close did the committee had them into getting in? Look, there were some people even arguing about Tennessee below Alabama, since Tennessee had the head-to-head win over the Crimson Tide. I think head-to-head should mean something at some point. I know Tennessee had worse losses, obviously the loss against South Carolina. Where would we be in? I would be very curious to imagine if Tennessee would have taken care of business against South Carolina or only had one loss. Where would we be if Tennessee's only loss was to Georgia? Ohio State versus Tennessee, non-conference champions. That would have been very entertaining as well. Let's see what else we got going on in the comments right now. Mark Edwards chiming in. What do you think about TCU and Michigan? Where does TCU have an advantage? I really haven't watched much of TCU. Hey, we're in the same boat right now. I got to watch some film on TCU football. I'm going to be taking in, probably be taking in a lot of that. I want to watch both their games against Kansas State. Okay, I want to watch the Big 12 championship game because, once again, I was working this weekend, so I had a lot of stuff going on. So I want to see that. I also want to see their matchup in which they beat Kansas State. I have a lot of respect for Kansas State. I have a lot of respect for Chris Kleiman, former head coach at North Dakota State. So that's what I want to see. I want to see how they fared against Texas. I want to see how they played against an okay team like Baylor. That's what I want to see. to see how they specifically match up against the University of Michigan. According to Matt Alderton, TCU actually had the hardest schedule out of all of the first 6 teams. That's what I've heard. I've heard that their schedule was not the easiest. And, that's kind of where we're at with that. So they did play a decently tough. Like the Big 12 was a solid conference this season. I'm not saying it wasn't great. I mean, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State were down. Texas was okay, but overall, I mean, TCU was a good team. Kansas State was a good team. The Big 12 was a solid league this season. Let's see more from J-Man talking about Penn State. Once again, Mark Edwards. It was said that the Fox Sports interview was framed as an opportunity for the team that was on the outside looking in to provide some feedback and insight, but passive-aggressive pleas were lame. Interesting. Because what it turned into was a politicking situation. That's what it turned into. And I think maybe some better questions could have been asked. I'd be very interested to see how much that Fox crew, how much time those guys had for questions. Were those questions fed to them? Because there were questions asked where it was kind of like, yeah, they're kind of feeding into maybe what Nick Saban wants, what they're talking about. So yeah, that's an interesting. I appreciate it. I did not hear that, so I'd have to see where exactly that's coming from. But yeah, that's an interesting take on it. Where maybe Nick Saban was originally just going to give his opinion, but it quickly turned into a politicking situation. So that's where we're at. With that, really appreciate the comments and some good discussion here going on in the comments. Really appreciate you guys coming on for Big Ten Ted Live. Once again, if you haven't already, it is a great time to subscribe to the channel. Big Ten content every single day. So if you haven't already, if you're new to the channel, welcome, first of all. Subscribe, if you haven't already. Also, Twitter is a great place to interact as well, at Big Ten Ted on Twitter. And if you want to see your comment, have it answered, all that stuff, have it highlighted, support the channel. However, Super Chat is a great way to do that, to support the channel, to help grow this channel to all that it can be. So we've talked about some Big Ten championship. We talked about Purdue putting up a fight against Michigan. We talked about Graham Mertz entering the transfer portal. We talked about Cade McNamara. Really excited to see if DJ Uiagalelei, who just entered the transfer portal, to see if he's a guy that maybe could end up on a Big Ten team. I think he's going to be highly sought after right now in the transfer portal. I still think there's some guys at Wisconsin that could maybe do some movement. Maybe we haven't seen the last of the movement at Wisconsin as well. So, here we go. Let's get into some bowl games. Okay, let's get into some bowl games, some Big Ten bowl games. Of course, I already touched on Georgia taking on Ohio State in the Peach Bowl. I already touched on Michigan taking on TCU in the Fiesta Bowl. So I'm just going to run down some bowl games. I'm going to run down some matchups, give my quick kind of opening thoughts to each game, and then we'll kind of see where things go on from there. Penn State and Utah, man, that's going to be a banger of a matchup. I really love what both of those teams have. You look at Utah and what they were able to do, the toughness, the physicality, but then you take a look at a guy like Cam Rising right now. He's throwing the ball pretty well. This Utah team was looking pretty darn good as well in that Pac-12 champions. You look at a team like Penn State right now that's hitting their stride late in the season. This is going to be a fantastic game. Like, go back to last year when Utah put up all those points. Okay, I want to see a situation where, we know Utah can play some pretty good defense. Okay, we know they can do that. We know they can score some points. How can Penn State combat that, right? Ever since Penn State lost to Ohio State and Michigan, not a lot of people are kind of talking about those teams right now. So, can Penn State hang with Utah? Can Penn State hang if it's a shootout? Is Sean Clifford a guy that can go out in his very last performance as quarterback at Penn State? Can he make a difference? Is he a guy that can possibly lead Penn State to an 11-win season? I'm really looking forward to this one. This is obviously it's the Rose Bowl. It's one of the biggest bowl games on the calendar. This is going to be a fantastic matchup. Joey Porter Jr. has already declared for the NFL draft. He's opted out. So they're going to have to, they've still got some good players back there in that secondary, but they might not be, it might not be as good as it once was. So that's kind of what we're going to be keeping an eye on as we continue to kind of go throughout this thing is, will Penn State, where will the opt-outs be? Not only in this game, but in other games. Okay, will Penn State be able to kind of hang around with Utah? Because when I looked at that game, of course, that Pac-12 championship game, I watched that on Friday night. Okay, are we in a situation where, USC, look, they got to get it together if they want to get in the Big Ten. They got to get more physical. Okay. That Utah team, when I watch them, that's a Big Ten team. That's Kyle Whittingham is a Big Ten coach. Okay, I know Utah, even though Utah is an AAU school, okay, in Utah, I'm sure if they got invited to the Big Ten, they'd accept. But man, that is a Big Ten type of program that they have running over there at the University of Utah. I'm really looking forward to that matchup as well. So Penn State, Utah in the Rose Bowl. Citrus Bowl, we've got LSU taking on Purdue. This is an interesting one. I know what Jaden Daniels has been doing at LSU. I know LSU is a very improved team, but where are we going? I think a big thing to keep an eye on here is opt-outs for Purdue. What's going to happen with Charlie Jones? I think it's worth noting what's going to happen with Aiden O'Connell. I think there's something to be said here about opt-outs that could really hurt Purdue in this matchup. And that's, before I put out any videos talking about these games, of course, I'm going to let it simmer just a little bit as well. But what about that? I think that could be something to keep an eye on as well. What's going to happen with opt-outs on both sides of the ball? It could really hurt Purdue in this matchup, but I want to see them kind of go after it as well. Let's move on to the ReliaQuest Bowl, formerly the Outback Bowl down there in Tampa, Illinois and Mississippi State. Once again, I'm probably going to say this throughout a lot of these bowl games, but opt-outs again. Devin Witherspoon is expected to be a top 15, top 20 pick in the NFL draft. Okay, you lose him off your defensive secondary, that's a lot. What about Sidney Brown? What about all these guys? I think that's a legitimate question here right now. It's crazy. That's the note I had. Can Illinois defense prove how good they are against Will Rogers? It's going to be a good matchup. You look at Chase Brown, you look at Sidney Brown, you look at Devin Witherspoon, you kind of look at all of these guys right now. There could be, Illinois might be one of those teams. You had a lot of experienced players. You look at Illinois and it could hurt them. I'm not saying all those guys because I have no intel on the situation, but that's a situation I think right now where that could really hurt a team like Illinois. I really think that could hurt them. Sunshine Design tuning into Purdue LSU. I think that's going to be a good game. It's a very telling game on conference strength. Where is LSU? I definitely agree with that. Where is LSU right now? Okay, because they went out, they won the West, they were able to beat Alabama, they got some good wins. But then they got destroyed in the SEC championship game. Where do they sit as a program? I think that's a very good point to bring up. And where does Purdue? Okay, they won the West. They were up and down this season. They played Penn State really tough at the beginning of the year. They got hot at the end of the year. Yeah, I agree with depths of the conference. I think you're going to really find out a lot here. Going to take a quick pause because I see a comment here from Mark that I want to address. Okay, he says, his words, not mine, opt-outs are for quitters, which is an opinion that a lot of people share. There should be a clause in every NCAA contract. And maybe we need to have kids sign contracts. Look, that's an off-season topic that I could cover. If you leave early or opt out prior to graduation, you have to pay the university back 200% in tuition, advertising, etc. You know, with this, these kids have, should I say they have the right? I don't know. It's hard because when they sign a scholarship, you're expecting them to be there. And I understand that part of it. But if they don't want to be there, and if they're not going to come back, what does it matter to them? Okay, the only way you can get to these kids with opting out is financially. Do you give them an extra NIL incentive for staying around in the bowl game? Because right now, you've got these big time opt-outs. You got these big time payouts from these bowl games. Maybe to the winners go the spoils in terms of NIL deals. Somehow you can structure it that way. So you've got that with bowl games. Like we know it, bowl games are getting less and less and less and less important as we continue to kind of go down the pike here just a little bit. So, you know, we're in a pro player type of time right now in college athletics and especially college football. I think there needs to be something worked out. Like I'm not saying which way it's going to go, but they think the only way you're going to get kids to stay or try to figure out a solution is monetary. And maybe, like Mark said here, is okay. You leave early, it's like voiding a contract, and I don't know what it says on these scholarships. But maybe there's, something where it says, hey, you will get your tuition paid for if you're around for this many games. Or maybe there's in current NLI's National Letter of Intents, or these scholarships, maybe there's a situation that says, we expect you to play all the 12 games, or if you're 13 games. If you're not injured, if you decide to opt out, maybe you have to pay back a percentage of your tuition or something like that. Let's just get on clear ground, I think, is where a lot of people want to be right now. So that's kind of, right now, as we currently stand, we're in a situation where, yeah, they can do what they want. So, I guess whatever they want to do is playing one game. Is that going to make your draft stock higher? Maybe a little bit, but probably not that much. It's probably not going to make a ton of difference as it pertains to the draft. I don't think it's going to make, if you have a bad game, I don't think it's going to hurt your draft stock. A lot of times these NFL scouts have enough tape on you where they know who you are and what you do. I think a lot of these players opt out because they just don't want to risk the injury. So, and if you get injured, yeah, maybe it does affect your draft stock. It kind of brings you down just a little bit, but I think it's maybe something, college athletics, NCAA, whatever, needs to work on to try to get that going on a little bit as well. Here's a good comment from Aaron McGrain. Okay, coaches opt out all the time, and you are correct. They do opt out all the time. Why not players? Okay, that is a good situation. But here's kind of going back. Okay, when coaches opt out, when coaches leave, now when coaches get fired, there's a buyout. Now, I don't know. I think when coaches leave early, they are terminating their contract. The school isn't terminating their contract. Okay, because when a school terminates the contract, they pay the coach what the road. When the coach leaves early, I believe it is usually the opposing school. Like say, Luke Fickell's leaving Cincinnati to go to Wisconsin. If he's leaving and terminating his contract early, he has to pay money back to the school, and usually the Wisconsin in this case. Not sure if this happened in this case, but in this hypothetical scenario, Wisconsin would kind of swoop in and cover that cost. Now, maybe that's something we can do with players in terms to their scholarship money. Now, if you got a lot of these players that are opting out, okay, that are going to the NFL, they're probably earning a good amount of NIL money. Okay? And what are they going to turn around and do? They're going to say, yeah, here's some money. Because I'm not up to date on how much tuition is at these schools, but say your tuition is 60 or 70 grand, and you're probably not going to, you're in a situation where it might be just a percentage of that. Even if it's 5 to 10 grand, they might turn around and say, yeah, here's some NIL money that I earned, and yep, see ya. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now with this. I'm not sure if you're going to stop this a ton. Like, I think that's what the expanded playoff is trying to do, is trying to keep, obviously, more interest, more money is going to be earned as well. But, to be honest with you, I think we're in a situation where I don't know if you're going to stop opt-outs that much. Look, you might want to stop opt-outs, but I honestly don't think you're going to. That's kind of the way I feel right now about that. So there it is on opt-outs. See if we got any more on opt-outs as well. Joseph Ford, too much money is on the line, and outside of the college football playoff, these bowl games don't mean anything. They don't. Working FCS playoffs this week, and I'm like, man, would I love to have a 2014 playoff. Man, would I love to have an FCS type of playoff. If you haven't watched FCS playoffs, that's something you should do. So, yeah. Chi-Town Rush coming in with some hoop stuff. I'm going to get to York. What, Northwestern upsets Michigan State? Holy, wow. I did not know that. Sorry. Good for Northwestern. Now, Michigan State's kind of had some troubles. They had a tough non-conference schedule to start. How about Nebraska going into Omaha and taking down number 7 Creighton as well? These two games just shows the depth of the Big Ten Conference right now. Big Ten basketball, man, it is going to be crazy. I'm not quite in basketball mode right now, but I think once these bowl games are done, once we get to January, I think I might have a little bit more basketball on the docket as well. Mark Edwards, NIL money in the system now equals contracts are a foregone conclusion. And maybe it's just a way of adjusting the national letter of intent or the scholarship that they sign that says, hey, if you leave early, if you opt out, just like the coaches, you got to pay some of that money that we gave you that the scholarship covers. So, that might be something as well that they might do in the future to, hey, you got to pay a portion of that back because you missed one game, you opted out of one game, so it's not going to be a ton. As well. More from Mark. The investments these Power 5 schools make in their players is massive. The profits these universities make from the players is massive to the power of 20. There has to be some reasonable expectations. We just got to establish something. We just got to establish what going forward. So whatever that is, everybody's just got to be on the same page. Mark saying, ask Michigan on the West Virginia buyout of Rich Rod. I think it was like $5 million. Yeah, there's buyouts on both sides from a coach's standpoint as well. Some Northwestern fans here, or at least fans of things that Northwestern does here in the chat tonight. So some really good discussion. Did not anticipate that I would be talking about opt-outs coming into this game, even though it is a reasonable thing that we might be talking about, but didn't think that we would be talking next year, or that we would be talking about that as it pertains to opting out and seeing what's going on next year. I'm going to get back here to bowl games, and now I lost my rundown, so I got to get back to my rundown here. Where do we leave off? Let's talk about Iowa and Kentucky. So we got, Iowa, Kentucky Music City Bowl, Nashville, Tennessee. So Spencer Petras is out due to injury. Alex Padilla has entered the transfer portal. So they're looking at Carson May or Joey Labus as the starting quarterback. So maybe this could be a little bit of an audition for those guys. They know Cade McNamara is coming in next season. Maybe both of them think they got some talent to put on display. Maybe this is a little bit of a showcase for maybe some other teams that still might need a young quarterback. So Carson May and Joey Labus might be in that position. We got a rematch. This was a game from last year as well. Will Levis, I don't think, turned out to be what some people said he'd be at the beginning of the season. So there's that with Kentucky. You look at Iowa's defense matching up against Will Levis and Kentucky, I think could be a very interesting and a compelling matchup as well. So should be very interesting to see how that matchup goes. Boy, if Iowa doesn't have much at quarterback, this could be a rough game. Kind of remember how that Nebraska game went as well. A lot of people in the topic kind of talking about basketball. I've been kind of kicking around some ideas about basketball coverage. I think this is still going to remain a heavy football channel, even going into January, February. But obviously we know basketball really heats up according to March, and especially according to Mark Edwards as well, Sunshine Design. Not a basketball fan in general, but for some reason the Big Ten tournament is terrific. Yeah, and then the NCAA tournament. Like that's when I think a lot of fan excitement really peaks for basketball, is there sometimes in March. More from Mark. The winds of change are blowing. Hang on to your hats and your sanity. It might be messy for a decade or so with college football, but we will eventually figure it out. Don't forget, this is an experiment. And like all experiments, we might keep some things. We might get rid of some things. Okay, so you got to keep that in mind as well. All right. North Carolina State and Maryland in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Two former ACC rivals kind of going at it with the Wolfpack. They've kind of been up and down this season. I look at Maryland, and obviously Talia Tagovailoa is going to look. Dante Demas, I think, entered the NFL draft, so I don't think he's going to be there for the bowl game as well. So that'll be an interesting matchup. Maryland's going to have to obviously throw the ball. Got to do some research on NC State. No, I don't watch a ton of Wolfpack football. Pinstripe Bowl, Syracuse and Minnesota. Like you look at what Syracuse, I was able to catch them in that wild game against Purdue earlier this season. This is a solid Syracuse team. Now, right, we were just talking about opt-outs. Minnesota, Muhammad Ibrahim. Okay, he's got a lot on the line. And, of course, he's had injuries in the past. Is this a guy that's going to sit out this bowl game? If Muhammad Ibrahim doesn't play this game for Minnesota, they're going to really rely on the arm of Ethan Kaliakmanis, the Greek Rocket, to really do some things. Can he against Syracuse? I think that's going to be a big question. Mo or no Mo? It could be a determining factor in the game in the Pinstripe Bowl between Syracuse and Minnesota. Guaranteed Rate Bowl is kind of our last one for the Big Ten. Wisconsin and Oklahoma State. This is a very interesting matchup, and I really like this matchup. The Guaranteed Rate Bowl really got a good matchup here because both of these teams had high expectations. People were picking Wisconsin to win the West Division, maybe make a return trip to Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game. Didn't work out that way. Fired their coach midway through the season. They've had a lot of turnover. They've had a lot of stuff going on. Still not sure if Jim Leonard is going to come back. There were rumors that said, yeah, he's going to come back onto Luke Fickell's staff, which I thought was crazy. And then, we've kind of got what's going on at Oklahoma State. They had a down year this season where maybe they expected that they'd be in the hunt for the Big 12 championship. So you got both teams. Where's the motivation? Going to Phoenix on a baseball field in the Guaranteed Rate Bowl. You know what I mean? It's just like, where's the motivation? Is there going to be motivation for either of these teams right now? So those are kind of the bowl games, the bowl matchups for all your Big Ten teams. You've got Michigan State, Rutgers, Northwestern, Nebraska, and Indiana. Those 5 teams did not make bowl games in the Big Ten Conference this season. Beginning of the year, if you told me Rutgers ain't going to make a bowl game, yeah. Indiana won't make a bowl game, yeah. Nebraska, I'd be like, oh, okay, but yeah, maybe they finished 5-7, But Michigan State, I think, is a surprising one. out of the teams that didn't make. I thought they'd go, man, if they didn't make a bowl, I thought they'd maybe go 6-6, 7-5, kind of something like that. But it really surprised me that season went the way it did, especially, man, losing to Indiana, costing them a bowl bid. Now, what if they would have beaten, here's what I want to know. What if they would have beaten Indiana, lost to Penn State as they did? They'd be 6-6. I mean, where do they go then for a bowl game? Maybe they go to one that doesn't have a typical Big Ten tie-in as well. So that'd be very interesting to see kind of where that would have been if that would have happened. Should be a fun bowl season. Remember, we're going to have a lot of stuff in terms of bowl previews, kind of breaking down. The transfer portal is going to be wacky, wild, and crazy, leading up to bowl opt-outs, that kind of thing. So there's going to be a lot to talk about in terms of that as well. All right, we got some here from Chi-Town Rush. Your feelings on Chase Brown being left off the Big Ten first team. Look, there's been Doak Walker Awards. There's been all-conference teams. Like, there's been so many awards and teams and all this stuff, and you got these running backs out there right now, Blake Corum, Muhammad Ibrahim, and Chase Brown. And Chase Brown is just another one of these guys where there's three really good Big Ten running backs. And whether it's the Doak Walker committee, whether it's the people who vote for, the coaches and the media that vote for the Big Ten teams, it's all a matter of perspective. Because these three running backs are fairly different, and I think they're all really good. And sometimes it's pick a day. Who's going to be better? Who's going to have the best day that day? Early in the season, I put out a video that says, who's the best running back in the Big Ten? I said Blake Corum. I still stand by that, but man, but you look at Muhammad Ibrahim, you look at Chase Brown. I mean, those are really, really, really close. Look, just because Chase Brown didn't make first team doesn't really mean that much. I still think he's a great player. I still think he's going to be a great pro. I still think he's a great running back. It's just this conference with those three running backs at the top is just a very deep conference as it pertains to this. So, yeah. All right, just looking through some more comments. Joseph Ford, USC is probably to blame for the repeat in the matchup. They probably wanted Illinois because of ease of travel for the fan base, but putting Ohio State in the playoff pushed Illinois into a different bowl. You've got USC, Southern Cal taking on Tulane, I believe, in the Cotton Bowl over there as well. So that's kind of where we're at with bowl games. Should be a fun bowl season. The Big Ten doesn't start until December 27th, 28th? So they're all in a very short period of time as to when these bowl games exactly will be played and how they will be played and all that stuff. So going to just quickly go back to some comments here. J-Man thinks LSU is going to destroy Purdue 48-24. Yeah, I have a feeling that we could be in a situation, we could be in a scenario where LSU puts it on them. And I think that's mainly because of this, opt-outs. Maybe Charlie Jones, maybe Aiden O'Connell. I think that's going to be a big factor as well. J-Man, speaking of Wisconsin, I'm not sure about the quarterback situation with Mertz leaving. Do they have someone lined up? Someone said maybe DJ Uyunglele. With a new coach, new situation, there's going to be a lot of changes in Madison, Wisconsin. And there's going to be a lot to talk about for a guy like me, for a guy on this channel. So that's something as well. So I don't know if they have anybody lined up. This just happened today with Graham Mertz leaving, so there's still a lot to decipher. There's still going to be more quarterbacks entering the transfer portal. Mark Edwards, Cade is a great quarterback, led us meaning Michigan, not us as in Big Ten Ted in the community, to our first Big Ten championship in 20 years. Take care of Cade for us, Iowa. It's going to be a bit awkward next year. Does Michigan play Iowa? I don't know. Obviously, they could meet in the Big Ten championship. And if they get some receivers around Cade McNamara, Iowa, I think, could be in a position to contend with what might be the very last Big Ten West Division championship. Matt Alderton bringing up a good point. Wasn't the Michigan-Ohio State game watched by about 17 million people? Could you imagine a rematch in the championship? That's a lot of ratings, and that's a lot of money. Yeah, it was watched by a whole hell of a lot of people. And, some people say the rematch could, put a damper on the rivalry or whatever. But, man, having that game in the national championship, man, that's good stuff. That's exciting stuff, especially for the Big Ten Conference. ESPN, treat us well. Try to treat us well. All right, let's see what else we got going on here. Josh Clark chiming in, Purdue LSU. Got some Boiler fans in the house. I don't think so. Not our first rounders. So I think he's talking about opt-out there. Plus LSU will have opt-outs. Yeah, I think that's a matchup where you got to talk about opt-outs a lot. I think that's going to determine how this game is going to go. Been hearing about this rumor. Josh Gaddis possibly making his way to be the offensive coordinator at Iowa, and maybe they do something else with Brian Ferentz. Been hearing that in numerous places, and maybe that's one thing. Maybe that's why we saw such a quick decision for Cade McNamara to come to Iowa. Maybe because that's Josh Gaddis was his offensive coordinator in that great season at Michigan in which they won a Big Ten title. So, yeah, maybe that's something where that could all happen. Everything is coming together. There's no question about that. Really appreciate you guys joining me for Big Ten Ted Live tonight. I think we're going to put a wrap on it here for tonight. Once again, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Big Ten content every single day. Going to have a lot of transfer portal news. Going to maybe some recruiting news, right? The early signing period is coming up as well. So make sure we're going to have a lot of football content. And then, of course, once we get to January, hopefully some Big Ten teams make it, get to do a preview and reaction to the national championship game. And then I'm going to get into some season recaps. We're going to recap the season for all 14 Big Ten teams. I'm hoping to maybe get some guests for that, some guys, who do some media coverage. My hope is to set the priority first with you guys who have YouTube channels, for team-specific channels to do recaps of each team. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see if that indeed does happen. See if I can get some guests on the channel here. Just had John Johnston from Core Nation on Friday. So really appreciate him talking about the wild week that was at the University of Nebraska. For Mark Edwards, Michigan and Iowa would be 2024, the soonest. Schedules for Big Ten play not posted yet unless they meet in the Big Ten championship game. So there's the answer to that question. So going to have a lot of stuff coming down the pike as it pertains to the wrap up of the football season. If you haven't already, at Big Ten Ted is a good place. That's where this news comes out quick. That's where I get my news. I follow a lot of good sources, a lot of good reporters, a lot of good people for different teams on Twitter. And that's where, this news, that's kind of the day and age and the news cycle we kind of live in is on social media. Things over there. And of course, if you feel so inclined, a super chat is a great way to support this channel on nights where things are pretty heavy in the live stream. It allows you to kind of get your comment highlighted and answered by me here on the live streams. It also helps support the channel so we can improve the quality of these videos and spend more time on these videos as well. So we appreciate that. Thank you, Mark, for being a part of the show here tonight. Very much appreciated. Friend of the channel. So I think that's going to wrap things up for this edition of Big Ten Ted Live. Hoping to have a live stream. Let's see. I'm trying to remember what I'm doing this week. Maybe Wednesday. I'll have that out on YouTube, have that out on Twitter here this week as well. So hopefully we can get a lot of fans in here, a lot of support for your Big Ten teams. We can talk about all sorts of things middle of this week, because between now and then, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of transfer portal news. So once again, thanks for tuning in to Big Ten Ted Live tonight. I'm Big Ten Ted, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.